I'm so pleased to have with us today Leeza Gibbons. She hardly needs an introduction. A lot of us growing up would watch her on Entertainment Tonight, and then she had her own talk show. Since then, she's been a huge advocate for Alzheimer's caregivers, as she was also touched by this disease in her personal life. So Leeza, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you again. I really appreciate the work that you do. It's so important.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's just start with your own personal story. I mean, like myself, you also had a mother with Alzheimer's disease, and I believe a grandmother as well.
Right. So I'm among those people, and I know there are lots of you watching who look at that legacy and that lineup, and there's a certain reality to that. There's a certain freak out factor to that. But the really positive and powerful thing about being a daughter of Alzheimer's is that, you know, your past does not necessarily have to equal your future. And what it gave you and me and all the others who kind of have that wake up call moment is a lot of awareness about what can we do? What can we control? What is our actual risk? And how do I scratch that track and not create that legacy for my children that I inherited?
Right. Now, tell me a little bit, how old were you when your mom was diagnosed? And obviously Alzheimer's had been in your family if you also had a grandmother.
Right.
So probably tell us the whole timeline of when was your grandmother first diagnosed, and then only to find out, you know, your mother later on had it.
You know, my granny, I remember being so welcoming and safe and funny, and we got away with everything with Granny. And I don't really have any idea what year it was when she put the biscuits in the dresser drawer, when she almost burnt the house down, when all of those awful telltale signs started to appear. But I remember visiting her when she was in a community with a memory care unit with my mother. And everything I learned about caregiving, I learned from watching my mother care for Granny, bringing her music, putting the lotion on her hands, brushing her hair. And every time we left, my mother would say to me, if that's ever me, don't come visit me. I won't know that you're there. I don't want you to waste your life. Well, in 2008, my mother died of the same disease that took her mother. She was diagnosed when she was 62. And so I was at that time at the height of my TV career. It was the kind of awakening that made me realize my life no longer made sense. And I loved my job. I loved everything about it. But I just couldn't figure out how to move forward when my true north, my compass for everything in life, and the woman that I wanted to be like had suddenly disappeared, and I wasn't able to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how this disease impacts family, isn't it? I always ponder over the question, because, you know, when I'm with my mom, she's quite happy-go-lucky, you know, so I often think, and they always say this, it's so much worse for the people around who are really witnessing, especially the later stages of dementia. You know, it's very painful to watch. But that's a big decision. And I can completely relate to that, because I had the same thing happen to me, where I found that, you know, I was a journalist and I was digging for more information on this disease, and I wasn't finding what I really wanted to know. And so that's how being patient really came about. But so, I mean, but you were really at the height of your TV career. I mean, you know, my whole team knows who you are, and multi-generationals, you know, we have 20 something, like, people know who Leeza Gibbons is. So tell me a little bit about what that was like. I mean, did you step away from the limelight in order to really kind of change the focus, what you call your true north?
I was dragged kicking and screaming. I was a reluctant recruit, definitely. But I created in the world what we wish we'd had. Our family, my dad, my brother, my sister, and I, and all of our extended loved ones, we didn't know where to go. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know how to find answers. And we all went to different corners to kind of lick our wounds. You know, that's what happens. We respond individually to trauma, to pain. And so I got to the point where this was just festering and churning and stripping away the essence of what I wanted my life to feel like, which was productive and proactive, and how could I help and how could I fix it and all of those kinds of things. How could I love my mother through this? So I went to my agent at the time and I said, look, here's what's happening with my family. So I'm going to create a foundation where we can help other families like ours. And he goes, wait, no, not a good idea. And I was told very constructively that this is a depressing disease. This is not marketable. This is not good for your career. Now, this was a while ago. It's slightly better, but still, we tend to be more comfortable hiding. The advice I was given, Deborah, was keep doing your children's charities. Keep working on things that people can rally behind you for. And it was so earth-shatteringly profound in that moment for me that I said, well, thank you for that advice. And you're basically fired. I knew that I had to move forward with people who understood where I was now. And that's what we're up against, I think, with this disease is you don't know until you know. And we put on this sweater and a little badge that says caregiver, but it's itchy and it's uncomfortable and we don't want to wear it. And so we kind of take it, we wad it up and we throw it in the top shelf of the closet. You know, there's a lot of emotional collateral that goes with being a caregiver. And there's a reason it's called the invisible army. You know, it's both priceless, the work that caregivers do, it's priceless and worthless at the same time.
Yeah, you know, it's so interesting though to hear you say that because all aspects of this disease, whether you're someone who gets diagnosed in an earlier stage, you know, there's so much shame attached to it. And I always think that's so sad because, you know, we have a lot of people in our community who are diagnosed now, living with it for 5-6 years and, you know, function very well and still have a very high intellect. But there's just this tendency, unless you become like an advocate and really put yourself out there, to really hide. You know, and I saw that with my own mom too. It was like once she was diagnosed, she didn't want anyone to know at all. You know, it was like something that brought her shame. And I thought, you know, for something we have no control over. I mean, we don't really, we talk about cancer in different ways. We talk about heart disease in different ways, but Alzheimer's, because it has to do with the brain and caring for someone, you know, it just has a whole different stigma attached to it. So, I mean, you know, hats off to you, because I imagine at that time too, it wasn't like, I can imagine the stigma around that was even worse than it is today.
You know, it is getting slightly better. And we do have this, you know, consortium of diagnosed individuals who are incredibly powerful and they are owning it. They have named it, they're claiming it, they're moving forward and they're showing that not only are they still employable and lovable and worthy and worth the dignity and respect that we would give anyone, hello, but they're helping to kind of break down that wall of shame that you very accurately talk about. You know, when we look at just the sheer enormity of the numbers, people that are diagnosed with this disease and their caregivers, you know, everyone knows someone. It's no longer, it's still in the shadows in terms of we don't have enough language for it, but we certainly know people who are experiencing it. And we see that it causes this great unraveling, this emotional unraveling, this spiritual depletion. Certainly it's financially very costly. It's costly in every way that we can quantify, in many ways that we can't. So I think that's part of the reason why we have this sort of veil of shadow around it, because we don't really know how to help people who are, for example, at our organization, as you know, we care for caregivers. So we have programs for those who are diagnosed and programs for those who care for them. So the whole idea is you shouldn't have to let go of who you are in order to, you know, hang on to your relationship with someone that you love just because you're caring for them. But that's the reason why I chose this seat at the table. Because when I learned that the diagnosed loved ones can die up to 10 years before their, the caregivers could die before their diagnosed loved ones, I thought, wow, that compassion fatigue and that caregiver burden is something we can really deal with. That can be mitigated. We might not be able to cure the disease right now, but we can certainly change that number so that the worried well, those people in the invisible army, can show up for their lives more effectively, and they can be more confident and more competent as caregivers.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about the care of your mom. Were you caring for her? Who was caring for her on a day-to-day basis?
My mother, my family still lives in South Carolina, which is now our flagship Leeza's Care Connection in my hometown where I grew up. My children and I live in California where I was working and had contractual to fulfill while my mother was in the early stages of her disease. Now, I was really lucky that I was able to travel back and forth quite a bit. And I became, as many of you listening are, the long distance caregiver who was coordinating the care team. My sister quit her job. She moved in. She had the frontline first responder work to do. She moved in with my dad to help him and help my mom. And she's the one that I began to notice immediately the effects of the caregiving burden on her. My brother, who is an attorney, which was lucky for us, he was able to handle that kind of management side of things. But all of us were blessed by a very rare occurrence, Deborah, and that is that my mother, when she was diagnosed, lined us all up, and she had paid one of the utility bills like 3 times. And she said, look, something is wrong. This shouldn't be happening. And she said, if I have what my mother had, if I have Alzheimer's, I want you to know that I don't want to live with you. I want you to help Daddy know when it's time to let me go. And she had researched these care communities where she thought she would be more comfortable. Well, that was an incredibly courageous thing. It gave us marching orders. And unlike your mom, which I think is very typical in people who are kind of shamed by it, mom was shamed up until getting a diagnosis. And when she got the diagnosis, I guess because she knew before anyone, she suddenly felt more empowered. And she felt, I think, that validated in some way. So they say you've seen one case of Alzheimer's, you've seen one case. And in this respect, that is true. But the fighting that happens with families and the conflict and the blaming and the sabotaging of the good, well-intended effort is all very, very common. And we had friction and we had sadness, we had depression, but we had our marching orders and we were sure lucky for that.
I mean, and that's so important. I'm realizing that now. In fact, I wrote about this in one of my newsletters, like how we kind of, my sister and I scratch our heads all the time saying, what would she think of this? Like what would she want to be now? Where would she want to be? And you kind of piece together little comments that were made in the past, but that really honest, open directive is so important. And you really don't, I mean, a lot of times, many people don't realize it until it's too late.
Right, which is why those conversations that we can have and letting our wishes be known and not making, chronic illness, not making dementia, Alzheimer's, death, dying, not making those taboo subjects in families is really such a powerful, positive step towards not only the nuts and bolts managing of it, but the healing and the grief process.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I love about Leeza's Care Connections is it's very personalized. Tell us a little bit about the programs, how you design them, what people do. It's not all, what I love is the way that you've described it to me is it's more around activity and happiness rather than just focusing on disease and sickness, right? So tell us a little bit about some of the programs that you run.
Thank you for asking, and thank you for recognizing, yes, we are about focusing on what's left and not what's lost. And we do believe you should be able to hang on to yourself and forgive yourself and start over tomorrow. And so we look at education, yes, absolutely. We look at wellness and prevention, but we also look at self-care, a lot of self-care, which allows caregivers to survive through this marathon, because it's sure not a sprint. So it's emotional support, it's energetic support, and most of all, it's what people tell us they want the most, which is to be connected with others who get them, to be connected with other people who walk this path and understand what it's really about. And our tendency is to be very superficial with caregivers. And when we say, how are you doing? We encourage our community and those who are asking to get past fine. You're really not fine. Maybe you're struggling. Maybe you're feeling resentful. Maybe you're feeling angry. But when you can validate those feelings and articulate them and share them with someone else who can witness that part of the journey, then you can be hopeful. And then you can have hope and you can cope. And those are really important distinctions.
So your mom, Leeza, was quite young. I mean, technically it was early onset Alzheimer's, right? Because she was diagnosed when she was around 62, you said?
She was younger than I am now when she was diagnosed, and her journey was about 10 years. Her mother's journey was about a dozen years in decline. And I really believe that my mother was able to instruct us with such specifics because she and her sister, my aunt, had argued about what was best for their mom, my granny. She knew that strife that came as a result of this. So when she put her head on the pillow every night, I'm quite sure, and she had told me that she contemplated where she was headed, and she knew a lot of where she thought she was headed. But she told me when I was so frustrated and so sad, and Mom, I don't know what to do. I want to help you. I want to make a difference. We're going to meet more people. We're going to talk to more doctors. And she would say, honey, here's what you do. You've been a storyteller all your life. You have reported on other people's stories. Just go and tell this story. So tell it and make it count. And it was, I don't ever say that without getting chill bumps, because it's so simple. And it saved me, my sanity. It gave me a purpose. And it was also the truth. That's all we can do. You know, she would always say, show up, do your best, let go of the rest. So creating Leeza's Care Connection was my way of showing up and telling the story.
I was going to ask you that too, because I think you kind of intersected your professional career with this cause for caregiving in a couple of different ways, right? Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that's really ingenious. Like, I think there was a Survivor, what was it, Survivor, one of the episodes where you raised a lot of money for, what was it?
Celebrity Apprentice.
Celebrity Apprentice, that's right.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, I'm not, years ago, I did Dancing with the Stars. And I say that by way of context, that reality shows are not really my thing. But my husband reminded me that's just because you can't dance, which should have been self-evident. But when the opportunity came to do Celebrity Apprentice, he said to me, and my husband helps me with this part of my career, he said, listen, you know business. I think you can win it. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm conflict avoidant. You know, I'm not gonna, I can't get on there, and I'm just, that's not for me. And he played the best card in his deck. He said, listen, you say you want to tell the caregiver story. You say you want to talk to other families with Alzheimer's like your family. This is your chance to do that and to really raise a lot of money. And he said, I think you can win it. Well, lo and behold, I did win the darn thing. I did earn some money, and that was the way I was able to open up in my hometown. It meant the world. It changed everything. And it was, and that's a beautiful way that you said it. It was kind of this great intersection of how my career and how all of us, our experiences in the past, they really do set us up for the most powerful present day moment. You've been through those kinds of transitions. I doubt there's many people watching now who haven't, been at a place where you want to go back to that other place because you were more comfortable there, you were making more money, or you were happier, that whatever it was. But we have to kind of let go of that, step into the new stage, find some new light, and move forward. And that's what I was able to do, thanks in part to that opportunity.
So is your life today 100% dedicated to Leeza's care connection, or where are you now?
It's pretty close. I'm still involved in the television business. I still host things. I still love to make speeches. A lot of them are about health and wellness and caregiving. But my focus, my passion, my real love is offering this psychosocial support, boots on the ground, real communities of people who have taught me the definition of resilience, who have taught me the real power of fierce optimism and the tremendous amount of respect that I give caregivers for showing up every day, starting over with that hope, with that ability to cope. It's incredible.
Absolutely. And are you worried about your because you have a family history,
Mm.
a mom and a grandmother, that's a family history. Like, what do you do today? Do you fear Alzheimer's?
Worry and fear, those are the kind of bombshell words that I don't own those words, but nor do I own the word naive. I'm not. I am well aware that I have a greater risk. But here's what we now know, more so than when my mother was diagnosed. We know, and you talk about it a lot, and you have so many articles and interviews on being patient about the ways we can mitigate our risk factors behaviorally. And so a lot of people who may think everything is stacked up, they're going to go there. Maybe you don't have to go there if you look after your nutrition, if you value your sleep, if you take care of managing your stress, if you stay social and connected with other people, all the things that sound like, oh, yeah, Pollyanna, happy talk. It is not. It is science. It's real. And you can focus on those things to give yourself the best shot at not getting it. So to answer your question, the best way for me to own that family history is to stay really grounded in, am I doing everything I can not to repeat this story? And I can tell my children, and do, that I am.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to hear that too, because it does provide enormous, I mean, to see someone like you say that, it does. And when you live through this disease, you do everything proactively that you absolutely can, right? And there
Yeah,
are a lot of things we know with science now. There's a lot of information out there to prevent Alzheimer's disease. That it's really just knowing your health and taking care of it. And being proactive about it.
it is.
We have a question from one of our viewers asking, Leeza, what do you think is different about dementia caregiving than caregiving for people with other illnesses? So Leeza's care connection, do you address all types of care, or is it only dementia?
Thank you for the question, and it's a great one. We open up our services to chronic illness and disease. A lot of our expertise and a lot of our community is based in Alzheimer's and dementia, but we have Parkinson's and we have cancer and we have traumatic brain injury, and caregiving for a chronic injury or something that may ultimately be a fatal disease is the same, meaning it's relentless. I think that most people will tell you that caring for someone with dementia in the final stages, because you can't get that important feedback from your loved one, you don't know if what you're doing is making a difference. You don't know if your loved one is in pain, they can't tell you. There's so many frustrating parts of it that do differentiate it from from caring from other kinds of illnesses, that I think it's particularly painful. I know there are diseases that also take someone's physical voice, if it's ALS and others. That's where caregiving, I think, really takes a leap of demanding heroic action and heroic stamina, because we live for that feedback of, great, I did this, and look, he's better, she's doing better. We know in general that better care for caregivers translates to better outcomes for care receivers, and we know that across the board. So we try to focus on that.
Do you know one thing? I mean, this is a non-scientific observation, because it's just so we've talked to now so many people and interviewed so many people with dementia, and I find, almost the people who are doing the best on this journey are the ones who have really supportive spouses or partners, right? And I can see that, and it's such a really big part of the equation, is to have like really positive support and an approach more like a team approach, more like you and me rather than just you, right? And I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it does tend to make a big difference, and we do see that. And it's hard to self-identify in general, and it's also hard to find your team, right?
Yeah.
Because we don't, it's just a very difficult reassignment of your identity. But we know that caregivers lose a sense of who they are. That's a big part of the collateral damage. And when you can reach out to, whether it's a spouse, a companion, oftentimes it's a member of a community like yours and like our community, where there's just another person who witnesses this journey. That is a huge exhale and bolsters your ability to continue. It's those of us who, and I've been there many times, thinking, oh, you get a gold star for doing all this yourself. And when someone says, what can I do? Let me know if there's anything I can do. You kind of tend to shine that on.
Yeah.
I learned how to ask for help. That's a skill that you develop, and you're right, you do develop it when other people can help you with that. But it's not intuitive for many of us. And if you're looking at a way to really be of service to a caregiver, those family members, millions of us out there, listen more and try to give advice less, because sometimes the well-meaning advice can sound like criticism, especially when we're really sensitive. Show up and take the assignment that the caregiver may give you. If you really make it safe for that person to tell you what would be helpful, ultimately they'll get to that place. And typically it comes back to what you just said. Because you lose so much of yourself, time is the greatest commodity you can offer someone. So, if you don't have time to do your nails, to do your taxes, to take a bath, to read a book, you lose so many parts of yourself that allow you to offer better care. When you can give that time back to someone by sitting with their loved one, offering some respite, it's just huge benefits for everybody.
Cynthia is asking, what advice do you have for a wife that loves her husband but feels so drained physically and emotionally? And she's saying her husband has been diagnosed with FTD.
Wow. First of all, asking the question shows that you're on it. It shows that how much you care, and it shows your intention. That's the best part of caregiving. Also, the being realistic about this, the grief, the loss, the change in this relationship. And the very first thing you said in your question was you love your husband. Yes, and it's different. Yes, and it demands way more of you. Yes, and this is no longer the partnership that you're used to having. So what was the second part of the question, Deborah?
She just said, because what advice do you have for a wife that loves her husband but feels so drained physically and emotionally?
Yeah, caregiver guilt is the biggest component. It's your constant companion in the caring journey. Kind of pour a cup of tea for guilt and say, all right, sit down. I know you're here to teach me something, but do not let that guilt spend the night. Don't let it take over your life. Don't let it become the thing that is the biggest part of you, because it doesn't belong to you. You're doing your best. When you're doing your best and you're really trying, then you have nothing to be guilty about. And I suspect some of feeling like I'm stressed, I'm tired, I can't do this. Those are really normal things. Those are cues to yourself that you need to reach out and connect with somebody else. Give yourself permission to not do it great every day, because you won't. But you're showing up the next day saying again, I love my husband and I'm tired. I love my husband and I don't know what I'm going to do. Okay, maybe you don't. But you can certainly, and you need to, for your own sanity, connect with others who will tell you that they've been there. And they'll tell you what they did.
I think there is a lot of comfort to offer one another, right? In this situation. Yes. Someone was asking also about caregiving for early onset Alzheimer's folks. I mean, is there, and that is particularly difficult because you're usually at a phase in your life where you're not thinking of old age, you're still in the prime of your life.
Yeah, I'll just speak to what I know, which is as a layperson and as a daughter of Alzheimer's, my experience with my mom watching my father in the early stages of my mother. She was, she was 61, 62 years old. They were very social, lovely people and loving people. And Dad found a way to still engage in as many activities as he could with her, given as her decline was going. So she wanted to be independent, right? He didn't want to take that away from her. And I remember one night she came out of the bedroom and she said, okay, I'm ready to go. And she was wearing her bra on top of her shirt like this. It was on the outside. And she had her lipstick kind of not perfect. And she didn't look like Mom usually looked, but this was what she had done. And she was ready to go. Dad looked at her and said, honey, you look beautiful. Let's go. And he took her out. And it was so instructive to me that about meeting people where they are. We've talked a lot about people in the early stages being so capable. Well, obviously, my mother's brain had already stopped working to the point that she wasn't able to sequence the right order to put things on, but she was very capable. And he instinctively knew that by criticizing her, trying to correct her, trying to fix it, they would lose a lot of ground. So it's always so beautiful to me when I can see family members pivot, adjust, accept, and move forward. And that's a lot of what happens. You come up with support systems. You leave Post-its everywhere. You leave notes on a visor if the person's still driving. You come up with the therapeutic fibs and the little white lies that allow for the person to still preserve dignity. There are changes that have to happen, but it doesn't mean that the person is not capable. And that's the really challenging time, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question asking, what about folks, so this is hard, what about folks who live alone with no spouse and family? Do you have any advice?
Who are diagnosed and who live alone.
I don't
Is
know,
that
I
right?
guess, but doesn't
Yeah, I'm
say.
assuming. And if,
Yeah,
if there's
if you're
someone,
alone.
if you're living alone, whether you're diagnosed or you're a caregiver, that puts you at greater risk for decline. We talked about this kind of unraveling and this business of falling off the cliff. If you are able to virtually get support, and this is something we do really great at Leeza's Care Connection, and you can do it anonymously. There are all kinds of programs, whether it's you want to eavesdrop on a support group and just see if it's for you. You need a grief support group. You want to do laughter yoga. You want to do a drum circle. Things that we know activate the body to stimulate the brain to make you better able to cope and better able to stave off decline. All of those things are going to help on the journey. So if you're by yourself, you might be able to access those programs virtually or have a private consultation with any of our team members. We've all been there before. We all get it. We all understand what's happening. And so our number is 888-OK-Leeza, and it's leezascareconnection.org, Leeza, leezascareconnection.org. So we'd love to help you and get into that with more specifics.
And then there's, I mean, I don't know if you can comment on this, but someone's asking about, because I've heard this many times. Like she said, please speak of the wandering problem because my husband roams continuously. I mean, it could, that's really hard when you're caregiving to have someone who roams a lot. I mean, it becomes very, very difficult. Do you have anything to say?
Well, obviously, the first concern for everyone is when you get to that wandering and that sundowning is to keep the environment safe. And, there are nonprofit organizations that can come out to your home that can make sure that, you're waking up every 3 hours, that at least if you don't wake up and your loved one is wandering, you know that he or she is not going to get hurt. So really important to have those safety valves on the stove, to readjust the hot water, to make sure that doors and windows, that the person can't get out and get into the street. There's a lot of techniques to how you interact with the person during the day that may help sundowning at night. It is a very tough problem, and the wandering is a very specific set of challenges. And again, we do have some material on that on our website, but our team members would be happy to talk to you about it. And there are experts on that subject. So what we do is our job is to be a hub and to say, let's connect you with the resource that you need. So and that can be a resource anywhere in the country, we can help you make that warm handoff so that you can get through to a person, a service that can get your questions answered and that can help you be successful and not cost you all kinds of money and time that you don't have.
And that's so important. And Leeza, I just want to say, you know, really from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for everything that you do and from raising awareness to providing Leeza's Care Connection. We will post the number that you quoted and also a link to your website on being patient in this article and video so that people know how to get direct, access and help, as you said, for Leeza's Care Connection to be a hub into what people's needs may be. But just to end this interview, just tell us, what did you learn on this journey that was so important? I mean, if you had to wrap it up into one, a couple sentences, what would it be?
I learned to be present. I learned that no matter how much energy we have, how smart we think we are, how much money we may have, you can't always fix everything. And sometimes there is grace in acceptance, and there are tremendous lessons in knowing your limits. I think that the bottom line is we are stronger because of our limitations, and our vulnerabilities are the things that make us human. And that's how we connect.
Thank you so much. And so nice to end on that note. So thank you so much for your time. If any of you have missed any of this interview, of course, we're going to post it on beingpatient.com. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter where we will let you know of other upcoming talks. And we will post all the details of Leeza's Care Connection on our website. So thank you so much, Leeza. Have a great day. And
you too.
Just continue to do what you're doing.
I'm crazy about you. Thanks for being such a great resource. Appreciate it, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.